All right, so get some good images of Rachel and sitting in the lunchroom and standing on the stage with her beautiful gown. So obviously, we're all good at this. We got it, you know. But you can teach kids how to activate mental images through not reading the text, because they have, first of all, have to start knowing what it's like to do it. So I just challenge you to be keeping an ear open to different songs out there that would be appropriate for your group, and have them practice of making mental images. And if we had time, you know, we can't do any of these activities fully, but you know, obviously we'd want kids to share and talk about what they see and what emotional connections are being brought up with that. So.
And you have in your folder one of these. It's actually an art for learning based strategy from Fairview, and it's about the music component, and it's called See, Hear, Feel, and we give you a template on that as well. So this could be something that you do with the music, or you could use it with whatever you want to, but the art for learning based strategy is a pretty good one. And we've actually done it before, and we've done it with music that had no lyrics, which kind of makes a different, right, totally different perspective on it. But I just wanted you to know that that's in there, it's for you to see. And almost everything that we've given you in your folder today, we will at some point today use in some way. And so, you know, as you're going through there, there's something that you have questions about, make sure you ask us.
So, once we move into book,
I'll just say something about that listening aspect, because, you know, we have to force ourselves to listen. And I think what we found out with that IRI is, you know, when you give that IRI, you should see whether a child is good at oral, silent, or listening, and what modality they're best at. And I found myself having to concentrate on those words because I had my eyes closed. And I thought how important that is for kids when they're listening to the teacher and getting directions and all of that kind of thing. It's just so, you know, you may have that one student that's the only way they get it, and if, as a teacher, you zip through those directions like that and you think everybody's got it, some kids need just a little bit more support with that. And I think I've become more acutely aware of that from giving that IRI. And I mean, I know, Nancy, you and I have talked about that, how important it is to give all three of those pieces, because you learn so much about the reader when you give all three of those pieces. And I just was out at Hoosier Hills we were giving these to high school kids. And, you know, it's just glaring, the response that you get. Some kids are much better at listening. Some kids are much better at oral reading. Silent reading tends to be like way low on the ability list where they get information, because they but some kids can't do silent reading at all. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
some kids need both. So
It-
you actually
absolutely.
have the lyrics
Absolutely.
to Rachel Delavorius in your
And so
packet.
some kids could
So
follow
You
along
could listen, you
if
could
that
follow.
was how they
you could do
learned
both.
best.
yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Thank you for.
So, you know, giving them the practice like that's important, and then once you move into books, you know, using those graphic organizers like we gave you are good ways for kids to dig into text. Debbie Miller, who wrote Reading for Meaning, was big on using Post-its and having kids have a little packet of Post-its in their daily 5 bins and put them right in text, like if you're working on one of these strategies, and take little notes.
Can I ask something about that? After hearing what Marilyn said this morning about that levels of comprehension use, and that the very most support a teacher could give is to put the Post-it in the book at a place where you're quite sure they should be able to activate a mental image. To cue them. Here it is, man, you should be getting a strong image in this section. And so maybe you have to start with that and then build from there. But for kids who haven't got in the habit of it, this might be just a hint, 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 here's a place to do it. So I'd really like to hear that range of support that you kids can have for strategies.
We put thinking stems in your packet too, when we talk about.
Yeah, they're just, again, if the kid doesn't know how to even respond, if you say, we're going to write today about what mental image is, what sensory images you have as you're reading, and then, well, I don't know what to say, you can give them some starters, I can see, I can feel, this makes me think of, or what, I don't know what else, I can't remember now, but sometimes they just need a little bit, just a few words to start them thinking.
Sensory imaging works in just so many of the things we're already doing in Writer's Workshop, the whole idea of showing, not telling, thinking about the kind of nouns you write and verbs that you write. It can happen in math, in story problems, applying, kids, having them think about what a story problem's asking so they can visualize those things. In Daily 5 and Cafe, making images is the 6th strategy on the cafe menu under C, so it's already there. In the rounds during work on writing, have kids use sensory words when they do their little writing pieces. Lots of different things in Daily 5 that you can do. It's aligned with our essential learnings under comprehension. And we were thinking about Brzezinski, many of us do repeated readings. What a great thing to harvest images out of repeated readings. They've seen it a million times. So instead of just, you could do word harvest too, but maybe taking it a step further, having them jot down certain phrases and things that access images for the child. Keene and Zimmerman put a rubric in Mosaic of Thought for us to refer to so kids can see if they're doing it. In the book, it's written with 1 at the top down to 5, but we reversed it and had 5 at the top, kind of like the scales that we already use. It's not a 4-point, but it's a 5-point scale. I won't read it to you, but it's in the book for you. And you can kind of see where, where your kids fall, under what score, and where you want to take them to. And basically, this whole idea is to turn on your brain TV, and this is a quote from 7 Keys to Comprehension. Sensory images are the cinema unfolding in your mind that make reading 3-dimensional. We like that.
Okay, so now we're just going to move to a couple of examples of things you could do with kids. I'm going to model a couple of primary examples, and then Eva's going to do some more intermediate. All right. Should have set this up before you could see. Here's one thing I like to do with kids. I like to say, they like to play, I don't know if they're playing Cowboys and Indians anymore, but when I was a little girl, we would play house in our basement, and I would try to be the first to yell, "I call Davy Jones as my husband," so they're really good at doing imaginative play. So let's say your kid being put on a beret, get a paintbrush, and say, "Today we're going to play Illustrator." And I'm going to read you a story, because every illustrator at one point had to have only text. Or obviously, there's not pictures ready-made with any text, so you just sort of get kids to imagine, how did it get from the point where the author thought of the text, thought of the words of the story, to the point where it's in this beautiful book that we're going to read. So we're going to play Illustrator. I want you to imagine what the picture should look like to go with this text. And one book I love to do with them is called Catalina Magdalena, Hoopensteiner Wallendiner. Raise your hand if you know that book. Okay. It's a song, actually, a camp song. And so if you were one of my little kindergarten or first grade classes, and I would say, "You're going to play Illustrator," I'd even hand out paintbrushes. What are you picturing? Listen to this song and get an image in your head of this little girl. Okay? Okay. I wish I had a kazoo to get me on the right note. I do sing it. She had a funny name, but she wasn't much to blame. Her mother gave it to her just the same. Come on, Cindy, help me, okay? Catalina Magdalena Hoopensteiner Wallendiner Hogan Logan Bogan was her name. Well, she had 2 peculiar hairs on her head. One was black and one was red. Catalina Magdalena Hoopensteiner Wallendiner Hogan Logan Bogan was her name. And I'd stop and say, okay, the illustrator. You're reading only the text. You're thinking, okay, so I get it now. We got a little girl who has 2 hairs on her head, sketching away. One of those hairs is black, one is red. She had 2 eyes that were quite a sight. One looked left and the other looked right. Catalina Magdalena Hoopensteiner Wallendiner Hogan Logan Bogan was her name. Kids really love this part. She had 2 holes in the bottom of her nose, one for her fingers and one for her toes. Catalina, Magdalena, Hoopensteiner, Wallendiner, Hogan, Logan, Bogan was her name. She had 2 teeth inside of her mouth. One went north and the other went south. Catalina, Magdalena, Hoopensteiner, Wallendiner, Hogan, Logan, Bogan was her name. And this is the last page that really describes her, but I hope you're getting a good picture of this gal in your head. She had 2 arms that flopped all around. When she walked, they would drag on the ground. Catalina, Magdalena, Hoopensteiner, Wallendiner, Hogan, Logan, Bogan was her name. Okay, you get the idea. So, do you have you're the illustrator. It's your job to illustrate this book, artists. Do you have a picture in your head of Catalina, Magdalena? You got her? And then, so yeah, you read these kinds of books before kids look at them. Here she is. Isn't she lovely? Anyway, so I think it's fun to teach kids to play artist instead of play cowboys and Indians, play artist. Okay, the other book we're going to play artist on is the one that the lucky winner will get to take home with them today, or actually back to your school. It will stay with your school. And I'm just going to read you part of it. Again, stopping and having kids talk about what are you seeing at this part. It's called I Need My Monster. Tonight when I looked under my bed for the monster, I found this note instead. Gone fishing, back in a week, Gabe. What was I going to do? I needed a monster under my bed. How was I supposed to get to sleep if my monster was gone? I tried to sleep, but it wasn't the same without Gabe. I missed his ragged breathing. I say, okay, what are you hearing? What would ragged breathing sound like? His nose whistling, the scrabbling of his uncut claws. How would I ever get to sleep without Gabe's familiar scary noises and his spooky green ooze? So illustrators, you get a picture of what Gabe might look like?
I'm sorry.
It was no use. Gabe would be gone for a week and I just had to have a monster. I climbed quietly out of bed so my parents wouldn't hear me. Grown-ups have some strange ideas about monsters under beds. I knocked on the floorboards, then scrambled back under my covers. I waited nervously. Would a new monster appear? What would he be like? Would his snorting be as cheerful as Gabe's? I'll just read one description. Basically, this little boy gets all these substitute monsters coming in, and there's something wrong with every one of them. How many of you know this book? Okay, so anyway, here's the first substitute monster. He's Herbert. And the little boy that needs to go to sleep. Herbert, what kind of name is that for a monster? You don't sound scary at all. Have you ever scared a kid before? Well, no, but I have read all the best books on the topic. Do you have long teeth and scratchy claws, I asked. No, but I have an overbite. And I'm a mouth breather. Listen. And again, stop and let those cute little kids talk to each other. What do you see and what's Herbert look like? Herbert's panting was kind of scary, but it wasn't enough for me. Listen, Herbert, I'm sorry, I just don't think this is going to work. It's nothing personal, but I really need a monster with claws. Picky, picky, picky. So Herbert leaves. Here comes the next monster. Okay, and so his name is Ralph. And he says, I understand you need a monster with claws. If you would please lean over, I will hold out an arm for inspection. So the little boy looks down and says, excuse me, I don't mean to be rude, I asked, but is that nail polish on your claws? Yes, it is, Ralph replied. I believe professional monsters should always be well-groomed. So, what are you picturing as a well-groomed monster claws? Anyway, it goes on like that. It describes the features that this little boy requires in a perfect monster to help him go to sleep. And it's an adorable book to use to teach kids mental images. So, this came off of the Sisters website. They recommended this as a good one for teaching mental images. So I just really encourage the use of any gimmicks, any hooks you can use. Man, tell them to be an illustrator, give them a paintbrush, put a beret on a head, and say, you get to illustrate this book. So that's some fun things I like to do with some primary kids.
And one of the books that we've used in primary too at Fairview, we've used this with a lot of kindergartners, and we actually did. I don't know if you've all been involved at all with any of the sketch and draws or quick draws. They're called quick draws, where you read, put on some music, they draw. But this is a book called Close Your Eyes, and it's excellent, especially for primary. Have you done this one, Liz? It's really a cute one about a little baby tiger who doesn't want to go to sleep, and Actually, I've done it with older kids as well, but it's especially good with younger children. Close your eyes. So that's a good one you want to take a look at. Now, for the intermediate kids, this was really a tough task. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. I read, I actually experimented on Jim last night. I had him, I said, I can't make up my mind, so you're gonna have to listen to me. So he did, and we both decided, I don't know, are you familiar with Milkweed by Jerry Spinelli? Well, it's really, oh, it has great sensory imagery in it, but it's very dark. Very dark. It's about dead bodies and they're throwing them on, naked bodies on top of a wagon and it, but I mean, you actually see this in your mind, but I thought it was too dark. So
It was.
Yeah.
I know, I figured the sixth graders would love that. They would be crazy about it, they would be all over it. So then I went with a standby. How many of you have, I'm sure everybody's read On Moon. And it's actually, when I was teaching fourth grade at Fairview, this was one of a whole group activity that was very effective, but it turned out that it was the most effective with my Tier 3 group. So I took these 3 boys in there that I was working with on sensory imaging, because they needed a little more work on sensory imaging. So as we went through this, I read the book to them, and then we reread the book, and then they got the sensogram, and they poured over this book. I mean, just poured over it, and it was like, they were so excited because they were finding all these images, and then they found things that I didn't even notice, like how the wind blew against the scarf, and the scarf felt the wind, and it was just, they were really engaged. So I'm thinking this is probably a super book for, well, probably anybody, but for an intermediate grade especially. Okay, what I came up with was, and Brenda, you and Fran will well remember, we went up and we listened to O.C. Calkins, and she read this book and made me think about Charlotte's Web in a completely different way.
Me too.
She was using it for retelling, but you can use this for sensory imaging, and it's very vibrant. So I'm gonna read it again, and I'm probably not nearly as good as Lucy, but I do want you just to kind of think about it, and I want you to think about it in a way that maybe you didn't think about it before, because that's how I came. Okay, here we go, Charlotte. So, where's Pop going with that axe? Said Fern to her mother as they were setting the table for breakfast. Out to the hog house, replied Mrs. Arlo. Some pigs were born last night. I don't see why he needs an axe, continued Fern, who was only 8. Well, said her mother, one of the pigs is a runt. It's very small, weak, never amount to anything. So your father's decided to do away with it. Do away with it, shrieked Fern. You mean kill it? Just because it's smaller than the others? Mrs. Arable put a pitcher of cream on the table. Don't yell, Fern. She said, your father's right. The pig would probably die anyway. Fern pushed that chair out of the way and she ran outdoors. The grass was wet. The earth smelled of springtime. Fern's sneakers were sopping by the time she caught up with her father. Oh, please don't kill it. Please don't kill it, she sobbed. It's unfair. Mr. Arable stopped walking. Fern, he said gently, you'll have to learn to control yourself. Control myself, yelled Fern. This is a matter of life and death, and you talk about controlling myself. Tears ran down her cheeks. She took hold of the axe and she tried to pull it out of her father's hand. Fern, said Mr. Arable, I know more about raising a litter of pigs than you do. A weakling makes trouble. Now you just run along. But it's unfair, cried Fern. The pig couldn't help being born small, could it? Oh, if I'd been small, Berth, would you have killed me? Mr. Arable smiled. Certainly not, he said, looking down at his daughter with love. This is different. A little girl is one thing. A little ruddy pig is another. I see no difference, replied Fern, still hanging on to that axe. This is the most terrible case of injustice I've ever heard of. A queer look came over John Arable's face. He seemed almost ready to cry himself. All right, he said, you go back to the house. I'll bring the runt when I come in. I'll let you start it on a bottle like a baby. Then you'll see what trouble a pig can be. But when Mr. Arable returned to the house, half an hour later, he carried a carton under his arm. Fern was upstairs changing her sneakers. The kitchen table was set for breakfast, and the room smelled of coffee, bacon, damp plaster and wood smoke from the stove. And I'm gonna stop right there. And I'm gonna think out loud. What did the room smell like?
Bacon.
Bacon. Bacon. The room smelled of bacon. Oh my goodness. And what else? And then you would have a conversation, let them turn and talk to each other and share what they're thinking about it. Now,
Can I add something?
yes.
I remember Lucy Cochran, and then she said, and it was for a demonstration lesson for retailing, but she said, make no mistake about it, every single word in a book is very deliberate. And so, tell kids that. She didn't just say, oh, I think I'll have, I don't know, what's another breakfast?
Cheerios and.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking they're the breakfast meat that's not from a pig, not really.
Right.
Oh, sausage? No.
And you know, I think that is one of the key things that Lucy Calkins said that whole day was how deliberate the words are in books and how we need to tell kids that the words are deliberate
Right.
in books. So they understand the author had a purpose. And when they write, they need to have a purpose too. I mean, that's what she said to me in all of that.
Yeah, so you can use that lesson as far as when you're listening to a book being read or when you're reading a book.
Mhm.
What are you picturing? Why might the author have put that word in there? What are you seeing? So anything that will activate their brain TV, you know?
Yeah, make a movie. And see, so many kids have probably seen Charlotte's Web, the movie Charlotte's Web. I mean, they probably all have it at home and they've looked at it. But I think what you're trying to activate here is a mental image that they haven't activated themselves before. And as you read on, the next page is it has even stronger imagery. This is where she talks about it being a white pig. And there's kind of a spiritual essence to what she was reading. It was very, I mean, it's moving. And when I think about how his face looked and how her face looked, and I had to stop and really think about all those things. And I think that's what we have to direct the kids to do. Stop right here. Think about what this looks like in your mind. Close your eyes. Or turn and talk to your neighbors. Or draw a picture of it. So I think when we're directing kids to create mental images in their mind, as you indicated, we need to make sure that they're aware of every word is chosen for a purpose. And that word bacon, I mean, honestly, I didn't even think of bacon
I
before.
neither. I think it's cool that kids, if they talk to each other, can share because different things pop out to different people. And, you know, like when Lucy was saying the word bacon, I was just so dumbstruck. Like, oh my gosh, you're kidding. I read that a million times and didn't, and it just hit you. That was a very purposeful choice, but to hear someone else's perspective,
Yes.
I hadn't thought of it that way. So either the teacher doing it or other students sharing.
And I think turning and talking, for kids especially, because they're always dying to talk to each other about anything.
Can I throw something in?
Yeah.
We did a 2-year project
Sure.
where we had kids talking to one another using a forum, like a Moodle forum or some other type of forum. And conversations went on for 2 weeks and it really got their attention. Kids bought in that were just kind of casually there, all of a sudden disagreed with somebody else about their view of what they saw. Others really agreed. And so also the technical side then is what those social conversations they can have about things.
And the social conversations are so powerful.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Very much so.
they stay
And like you're
engaged
saying, they can go on forever.
Yes.
Yeah.
It brings them around to other things and draws their interest on other books, for example, things like that.
So I think what we've tried to do here, just kind of in wrapping this up, jump in here, but what we've tried to do today was provide you with just maybe some reminders, because a lot of these things you've been doing and have done for forever, but just a reminder or maybe a template or maybe just a new idea or a book list included in your folder. You're going to find a book list as well. Some of the books are back on the tables that you can take a look at, but we wanted to just give you something that you could take back and maybe you could use tomorrow, maybe not tomorrow, maybe a week or two, maybe never, but it's something that you hadn't thought about. And it's really about what we can do to help the kids. And in helping you or giving you some ideas or you a list of things, it's about the kids. And it's about creating in their mind. And they're all coming to us at different levels and different different terms of engagement, but we still are responsible. Make sure they all come out of that with some kind of sensory imaging.
Obviously, the ultimate is for them to be able to read text and do that powerful stuff, but if they're not there, you have to start where they're at and teach them how to do that, and that's where using songs or snippets from TV shows where they just hear the audio and not see the video.
Smell bags.
Mystery
boxes,
all that stuff, you know, can
mystery
help, or
envelopes.
you're doing think alouds, or you're putting post-its in a book where they get to be cued that this is a place. All those things are, I think, kind of scaffold them along the way. So, does anyone have any
Yeah.
things that have worked well that you'd like to share?
You just jump right in.
Or take the time and look at some of these
Well,
books.
we gotta do the
Oh,
drawing
oh,
first.
Oh, yeah.
Did everybody put their name in here?
So, are there any questions, or is there
Yeah.
anything that we could have covered that you don't think we did? That you think would have maybe, yes, no?